Hi everyone and welcome to Fresh from My Garden. Today I'm sharing a view of our sweet autumn clematis that has bloomed after almost 2 years. Sometime in June 2020 I had shared a view of these beautiful flowers in bloom on our terrace garden, and this is the same plant that has started to bloom now. So, after it bloomed in 2020, the flowers died back, and initially, we did not prune this plant. We didn't know that we had to prune back the plant for it to get a lot of new buds. But in spite of pruning back this plant and in spite of it growing well, it did not produce any blooms. And after 2 years, now I'm excited to see a lot of new buds that are getting ready to bloom. And I've been recording the progress of these buds blooming for over the last 1 week. So, in this video, I'm sharing the reason why these flowers did not bloom in the last 2 years, and I'm also sharing the progress as these flowers go from buds to full bloom. So, this is growing in a container on our terrace garden in full sunlight. So, these plants do well in partial to full sunlight, but if you want these plants to really bloom well and look really filled with lot of flowers, then they need a lot of sunlight so that they can grow well and produce lot of flowers. As you can see, these white, beautiful, star shaped flowers are gorgeous, and they are not just beautiful but they are also very fragrant. So, as we open our terrace door and step out onto our terrace, we can smell these beautiful flowers in bloom. And over the last few days, I have been taking videos so that I can share the progress from the plants in bud form to the fully bloomed form. These plants can be easily grown in containers. So ours is in a 14 to 16-inch container, and it has been growing really well. But they can also be planted in the ground. But when planting in the ground, there is a problem of it being really invasive and taking over a lot of space. So, if we want to keep them in a smaller space, it's better to plant them in a container, but slightly larger container, so that these plants can grow well and bloom and have a lot of beautiful flowers during the flowering season. Every year, after the flowers have bloomed and died back, we have to cut back these stems almost down to the base stem because the flowers usually bloom only on the new growth. So these plants grow pretty quickly, and once the season is on, the flowers are in full bloom, and these blooms stay very fresh for a few days. They don't die back in a day or two, and they stay fresh for a few days or even up to a week. So, these flowers are all blooming on the new growth or the new branches on this plant. So, they don't grow flowers on the older branches. So, we need to prune them back or cut back after the flowering season is over. Clematis is a trailing variety or a climber variety of flowering plants. So they need a trellis or a support system so that they can climb up that trellis, or even they can trail down from a fence or a wall so that they can cover up that entire space and look really gorgeous once they are in bloom. So, in this container, we have a small support system so that these plants can cling on to that support system and climb up. And we have also attached a few strings to this support system, and it can climb on to those strings onto the net that we have above our terrace garden. So here you can see the few sticks with a little metal ring used to make a support system for this plant to climb on as it is growing. Once the blooming season of this plant begins and we start to see a lot of buds starting to form on this plant, we can provide a organic fertilizer for all these flowers to bloom well and look very beautiful. So we usually make a homemade fertilizer using a lot of banana peels, eggshells, tea and coffee waste. So we use all of this to prepare a homemade fertilizer that we use for a lot of flowering plants in our garden. Liquid seaweed fertilizer is also a really good fertilizer that enhances the growth of a lot of plants, and I've started using that recently in my garden and seen a lot of growth in many of the plants in our garden. So that is another fertilizer that can be used for many plants, including flowering plants in the garden. Now, coming to the main reason why this plant did not bloom for almost 2 years. So, this plant has been in our garden for more than 2 years, and the first season it bloomed really well. But after that, as these plants started growing, we found a lot of pests in the garden and mostly mealybugs that were attacking this plant. And not just a few mealybugs here and there were big, huge clusters of mealybugs attacking the entire stem, and we had to constantly keep pruning back and use a lot of organic pesticides for getting rid of these mealybugs. But none of those organic pesticides worked, and we would constantly keep cutting back these plants, not giving it a chance to grow or grow new buds or start flowering. So it was really disappointing, and that is when I came up with one quick thought in my mind of planting a few onion bulbs in this container. So, as you can see, there are a few onion bulbs that have been planted in this container, and I'm really happy to say that it worked. And these onion bulbs are something that has protected these plants and made sure that it grew to this stage. So, for 2 years, we have been trying all the ways to get rid of pests on this plant, and we had to cut back because it would otherwise infect the other plants on our terrace garden. But nothing worked using neem oil, chili garlic spray, and so many other things. But none of these organic remedies worked, and we don't use any kind of chemicals in the garden. So we just kept on pruning back and cutting off all the branches until one day I thought, why not give this a try? Companion planting always helps with getting rid of a lot of pests. So the smell of onion and garlic repels a lot of pests. So I just randomly brought a couple of onions that had sprouted in my kitchen and planted them in the same container just to see if it would work. And it really worked. And this year we got a lot of buds and blooms, and we were so excited to see that this plant didn't get infected as much after I planted the onions in the same container. There are a few infections here and there, but apart from that, there are no big time infections or huge complete stems getting infected in such a way that we had to cut back or prune back this plant. I hope you liked this video and the tips that I shared about this beautiful plant in today's video, and also the benefits of companion planting in the garden. So, in our case, it was just an experiment that I tried by planting a couple of sprouted onion bulbs from my kitchen in this container just to see if it would work and repel a few pests so that this plant could grow beautifully and produce these beautiful flowers that have a lot of beauty and wonderful fragrance. So, over the years, I have been trying and experimenting with different things, and we learn new things about what works in the garden and what doesn't. So, don't let anything new stop you from gardening. Keep experimenting and keep trying out new methods to have a beautiful garden that is pest free, organic, and good for our home and for our environment. So keep watching and thanks for watching Fresh from My Garden.